Okay, so today we are going to be learning about the origins of the plantation complex in the early modern era. We are going to go through this by understanding the movement of sugar and sugar production and also the needs of labor, particularly from West Africa. So with that, let it begin. So here you can see on the slide, we're going back to the post-classical era, and we are going to be discussing sugar and the movement of sugar out of the Indian Ocean basin and out into the Mediterranean. So, sugar's original origins are from right here, Southeast Asia. Then they moved over and into South Asia, where they went through refinement processes and different production styles. Now, around 700, with the rise of Islam and Dar al-Islam moving out through the Indian Ocean basin, we had this growing business connection throughout the Indian Ocean basin, and which then connected over to here, the Levant, and into from with Islam's connections to the Mediterranean basin by, we're talking 900 CE. All right, so we're going to move on from that and move into the Mediterranean basin. So in the Mediterranean basin, right, we have sugar production. What they were doing is in the center of this image, you can see a mill, right? And in the mill, there's a grinding process, which would take the cut down raw sugar cane on the left hand side of your screen and make it into the sweet yummy nectar, which everyone likes, over to the right, sugar granules. This was modified from the Indian Ocean basin into the Mediterranean and moved throughout the Mediterranean basin during this time, which will be demonstrated through the next slide. Okay, so next slide here we are looking at, right, is certain areas. So previously stated, we had the Levant, right, over here. This is where we have sugar production. It moved, right, from Levant to the islands, right? One of them is Cyprus here, the other one is Crete. Then it continued to move in a westerly direction to Sicily. When it started moving here in Sicily, right, these connections, right, were really drawn out by the Crusades. The first Crusades captured the Levant region over here, right, which is right here, and in that, right, moved it across this action through. Well, Europeans started to get a sweet tooth, per se, and eventually moved on over to, right, the Iberian Peninsula. This was there by, the 13th century, but really started gaining strength by the 14th century. Well, what does that mean then when we have this movement of, right, sugar through the Mediterranean? Well, what it does mean, right, is it moves out from Spain, right, into the Atlantic basin. Okay. Goes from here, right, with the Portuguese into the Azores. Then, with the Portuguese and the Spanish, right, it's moving into the Madeira, Canary Islands. Here they started practicing their ideas of plantations and actually started plantations on these areas. One problem is they need labor. Well, not enough Europeans are moving with the labor. So as the sugar moves down to the Canaries and then over into Sao Tome, right, what you have is all of a sudden they realize they need African labor and slave labor. Within Africa at the time, right, slavery is endemic to the region, and the Europeans are utilizing economic ties with African local kingdoms to produce this slave labor, which creates the foundations on a plantation for sugar production. This, right, takes another step, and that other step, right, we're going to see crosses the Atlantic. In this slide you have, right, navigational practices. The Portuguese, right, by this time we know, right, went around Vasco da Gama to South Africa into the Indian Ocean basin you have Henry of Portugal, you also have the Spanish Columbus, the names from other. But in this image you can see, right, the naval, right, this ship right here is able to navigate, right, the westerlies and also the trade winds and come back into, right, creating a constant contact, which we know is the Columbian Exchange. But what we're looking at in this sense is the plantation economy. Well, where does it go? Let's take a look at where it goes. And what you're going to see is, right, the Spanish, if we go, sorry, moving forward here a little bit, coming back, finding the right slide for us. Right. The Spanish, right, take this and move it into Mexico and Cuba, right, in this region coming from here. Then we have the Portuguese, which create plantations, right, in Brazil. Obviously the Papal Bull, right, the Treaty of Tordesillas splits this world, right, and creates these contacts from. However, what you do have after this is other Northern European entities coming out and exploring into the area. Well, where is the area they're going to go to? Well, they're going to go to the Caribbean. And which area of the Caribbean are they going to first go to? Which is this area, which are the Lesser Antilles, right, in here, of the Caribbean. Okay, you have the French, right, you have the English, you have the Dutch. Well, the Dutch are going to take, right, technology from the Portuguese and give it or sell it to the French and the English of the Lesser Antilles. Well, these islands here are great for growing sugar because of the trade winds that come in and bring in the moisture, which sugar needs a lot of moisture. It's a great climate, right? Also at this time, it's going to create the need of labor, where they're going to be getting this labor from West Africa, as we know the transatlantic slave trade, which we'll discuss in the next upcoming lectures. So, what you have here then, right, is then, well, I'm making it here, well, how do I get it back? The next slide we're going to show gives you this idea of, right, coming into and producing it back over. Well, you can see two areas on this map that discuss this. Well, interesting, you have Jamaica, right, which becomes English. You can see here it takes this map. They need to go back and over into Europe, but they have to go around Cuba to get the Gulf Stream. Well, if you're over here in the Lesser Antilles, you just take it back to Europe. Prices back in Europe of sugar from the Barbados, which is right here in this area of the Lesser Antilles, is cheaper than over here from Jamaica because the shipping cost. Just an interesting point of how geography plays into the movement of the prices of sugar and the plantations which are producing this in the Caribbean. Alright, so moving on. Well, this labor, what we have going, right? Well, where does it come from and what do we do? Well, we know it's coming from, right, West Africa. In this image, right, you see, right, Africans, right, moving other Africans, right, to the coast. We'll discuss more in detail, which is interesting because the historical interpretation now is more of a blend, right, on you have this internal agency which was shown in the previous slide, which is over here, right, is you see here you have the European ship, but who's in control, right, you see right here are Africans moving, right, slaves out to the ship. And you see these little ships here. However, the image on the left, right, is you see external. You see on this one, right, see how there's Europeans, and notice there's no Africans, or the only African you can see is a slave. We know now, right, through over a couple decades of historical research, right, the agency is both internal and external about the labor pools. But obviously this rising plantation economy moves this whole system of labor, and we've looked at the movement of sugar, which anticipates this. Next lecture will be on the movement of more transatlantic slavery. I hope you've enjoyed the origins of the plantation complex in the early modern era. Thank you for listening.